Last time we talked about closing the learning cycle when redirecting students and handling behavior. We wanted you to reflect on if you've been able to close that learning cycle and give that positive praise to students when they do comply, and if you've noticed any differences when you redirect those students. Then the next slide is just a reminder of what that learning cycle looks like. Verbal communication is typically 15 to 35% of the way we communicate, and the other part is nonverbal communication, which we're going to talk about next time. So our verbal communication is a way to indicate how we feel. When we learn to manage the rate, tone, and volume of our voices, then we can ensure that our students are sent the right messages about our own feelings. That means that positive verbals reassure students that they're in a safe environment, and when students feel safe, then they can begin to connect with their teachers and their peers, and it builds that sense of belonging in their classroom. Also, when students receive positive verbal communication, then they feel emotionally settled, they feel more secure, and it quiets their limbic system, which is their reactive brain, and it allows them to be more focused on the present. That allows them to be able to process and respond appropriately to what's going on around them. Here we have some effective verbal communication strategies to try. The first one is to talk directly to the student and not over the student. For example, if they're at their desk or on the ground, then bend down to be at their level to let them know that they're safe and that you're not trying to intimidate them. It's also important to know that eye contact is not always needed for a student to show you that they're listening. Especially as we continue to talk more about being culturally proficient, it may have something more to do with their culture than the fact that they just don't want to make eye contact with you. We also have to manage the rate, tone, and volume of our speech as we're talking to our students. If you're walking into your classroom and you're loud and energetic, but you see someone that might be in the blue zone, you don't want to overwhelm them, so you have to adjust your rate, tone, and volume to what zone you're perceiving them to be in to help them regulate. It's also important to respond immediately to students and acknowledge that you heard them when they're speaking to you. And then the last one is to be an active listener and always to respond, like we said. We have some examples and non-examples of effective verbal communication. So some examples of effective communication are having a low, calm, neutral voice tone and volume, a slow rate of speech, and a tuning to communicate support of the emotional state that that person is in. An example of this is Mrs. Lewis sees Jamie walk into the room and excitedly says, "Hey Jamie, how's your day going?" Mrs. Lewis quickly sees that Jamie's shoulders are hunched over and she has a frown on her face, so she quietly asks Jamie with a calmer voice, "Is everything okay, Jamie? I noticed that you seem a little sad." If you listen to that example, the teacher attuned to the student's emotional needs and adjusted her tone before asking Jamie if she were okay. Some non-examples of verbal communication are talking loudly or yelling, using sarcasm, mocking the person you're talking to, or saying things like, "What do you think I just said?" or talking too quickly. After going over those strategies that are in the box on the right side of the screen, we want you to think of a time that you used non-effective verbal communication and think about how that could have affected your classroom or the person that you were talking to. Now think about how you could incorporate one or more of these strategies and how you'd like to try them in your own classroom.